Hi, this is Quynh
and Jessie Chu, co-founders of Paper Talk. Welcome to Season 5.
We're here to share our paper flower journeys, engage with makers and artists, and support other female entrepreneurs.
Follow along as we give a voice to and nurture a community of paper florists from around the world.
Hello, people. Welcome to our Over Coffee. We're switching things up this time, and we're going to go back to our roots of paper flower. And Jessie and I were just talking, and we realized we never really discussed on our own what crepe paper means to us. So, and talk about a little bit about the history too. A lot of people, when they think about crepe paper at the very beginning of a paper flower journey, is those tissue rolls, that super thin streamers that you would throw for parties. They would make piñatas out of them. But as you get to know crepe paper, it's very interesting because not only do they come in these really lightweight, I believe the crepe tissue streamers are like 35 grams, which is super, super light. The next gram that you go up to that you can find is the 40 gram, which is actually made from Carta Rossi. They have a whole line of 40 gram, and we actually use that in our paper flowers. But I have to warn you, it doesn't have a lot of stretch, but it's very useful in certain instances. Jessie, how would you use 40 gram in your world?
I don't really get access to 40 grams in Canada, other than by purchasing it through through Crepe actually. So going back to your question, how would you use the 40 grams? I probably would use it like the German Denizen fine crepe paper in a similar manner. In terms of its extra lightness.
Fine. Yeah, it's the extra fine that we're talking about.
No, the fine crepe paper.
Oh, the fine is lighter than the extra fine.
So yes, it's different. So the Denizen, there's the fine crepe paper, and then there's the extra fine. So you're probably, I don't know what you're familiar with, to be honest. What I'm familiar with is the fine crepe paper because that's what the paper place carried. Yes. So at the beginning, that's what I used, the really light stuff. And the 40 gram didn't really come in. The 40 gram Italian crepe paper didn't really come in until much later because I didn't have much access to it. And Crepe also didn't carry the 40 until the recent couple of years. But like the light stuff like that, I think can be really beautiful when you're ruching it up, when you're using it in multiple layers, just to create more integrity in the petal or the whatever you're using it for. It is
lamination, right? Is what you're talking about.
Yes, lamination, or you don't have to laminate it. You can just, double it up, triple it up, quadruple it up, and use it like that. Really anything to your imagination. I just wouldn't use it for like big petals, right?
No, definitely not.
We wouldn't use it for big petals.
Yeah.
Even if you were to try to wire it with like really thin wire, it would just be so obvious, like you could see it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I absolutely think there's a time and a place for it. I do want to mention the fine crepe paper, which is the Denizen, which is made in the US by Denizen. It has some really beautiful muted colors. And there are some colors there that you cannot get in any other types of crepe paper, whether it's Italian or Chinese or Mexican. And because it is technically German technology, right? Because Siemens, which manufactures the Denizen, is in the US, but it did buy out the German technology. So it's very similar to actually the German doublet or double-sided that a lot of people use in terms of how it's dyed and how it's made. And so you can really cross-pollinate that way, and especially with the coloring. We talked about that before.
And also, if you guys are looking to buy Denizen, rosemill.com actually carries it in their shop. So check them out there if you're looking to experiment with Denizen. We would love to see what you make with that.
Yeah. It actually was the first type of crepe paper I had access to. So I was very familiar with it. But then once you graduate to heavier weights, you do really have to rethink about the way you're using the really fine stuff because it doesn't ship well. If you've had it for years, you can see that kind of wilts a bit. It changes its shape. It does fade quite easily as well. Now the 40-gram Italian, which is different from the German, the dyeing process is different. The coloring, it's different. It's different technology. So I can't really compare it to that in terms of coloring.
Yeah.
But what I do know with the Denizen is that it's because it's so fine and delicate, it does fade. It fades really beautifully. But if that's not what you're looking for, then you do have to be careful when you're using it. As a hobbyist, it doesn't really matter. But if you're spending hours on it, like it can be heartbreaking if a couple of years later you're like, oh my gosh, it doesn't look like the way that it was.
Yes.
But I mean, Quynh, I mean, speaking of which, like what are some ways that you take to kind of protect the color from fading too much?
Well, we all know Krylon. Krylon has a great UV protective coating spray that you can spray it. I tend to spray my flowers after they're done and not worry about coating the whole sheet of paper. I feel like that's a waste because, you know, you're cutting things and you might be gluing things or Mod Podging things. So I like to, right before I deliver it to my client, so you have to really think about your deadline. I always buffer in 2 days to let my flower cure in the UV spray because it does smell. And how do you know that the spray actually is on it and has staying power is when you can't smell the spray anymore. That means that the spray has actually evaporated, it's dried, and it's cured. If you smell a little bit, make sure you air it out. Make sure you're outside spraying things. I think that's really, really important because, you know, or wear a mask. I mean, we're so used to wearing a mask that it's just easy to put one on now.
Not a big deal. We all have one.
Exactly. And then there are now, I feel like there's more sprays. What Winston Newton, you can buy that at Michael's, at Blick. They also have a preservative coating spray for watercolor. We can use it on our crepe paper. The other one, what is that one called, Jessie? It's called the gold. Is it golden? I forget.
Golden? Yeah.
Yeah, the golden. So they also have one too. That works really well. I like the Winston just a little bit more. I don't know why. Maybe the smell is not as heavy, but it does seem to work really well. But Krylon, you can buy it at Home Depot. You can buy it at the craft stores. It's a little bit cheaper and more readily accessible, I believe.
Yeah. I think it's an American brand. That's what's so accessible here. So like if you're in Europe, there will be an equivalent brand, essentially any kind of
UV spray.
archival spray, anything to spray and protect your artwork. So if you're a painter or if you work with pastels, you probably will be familiar with those types of archival sprays.
Yeah.
But I mean, back to crepe paper, once you graduate from 40 gram, there's 60 gram. I was going to say, what's the difference between 60 and the fine crepe paper and the German? And the 60 definitely has a different quality, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a stretch. You can definitely see the stretch between the 40 and the 60 for me. And I actually ended up using, let me see, I love using the 60 for my pollen. I like to pair it. So I like to laminate the German double-sided with the lighter crepe paper to create that pollen look. And you can do it in multiple ways. And I would have to say, the coloring power of the Italian crepe paper. So if I'm cross dyeing my paper, I like to take the Italian because I feel like the dye comes off really easy. You know what that means? It means it fades really easily. But in that process, you can actually pull those colors out and transfer it to another one. And then, of course, you would use that archival spray to kind of help preserve it a little bit longer. So that's my method. Yeah.
The 60 definitely has a really beautiful stretch. You can literally like push your thumb through and it would hold and it wouldn't break. And it's so like stretchy and it's so the paper is, there's something durable about the paper that you know, the comparable weight kind of in the German, it doesn't have the same type of durability.
Yeah.
But
it's
like
very,
you said,
it's fragile. It's very fragile.
Yes.
But so, okay, I like to ask you, because I've been seeing on your Instagram feed, you've been doing beautiful Icelandic poppies. I've been experimenting with some too, because I just did an extra large one with the Italian 180, which works really beautifully with it. But for the smaller ones, when you're runching things up, we talked about, you know, how to double things up by not just laminating, but just notching the bottom of your petals to kind of straighten them up a little bit. But when you do your poppies and you're like twisting it and twirling it to get that signature poppy look, did you experiment with like 40, 60, and 90 to see which one had the better poppy effect petal look.
Yes, absolutely. I don't find much difference between the 40 and the 60. It's such a slim difference. You can tell the difference when you're using it flat, but when it's scrunched up, I don't think there's that much of a difference. I have used 90, so we'll talk about that as well. Quynh and I will talk about that later because that's a really exciting piece. And when you stretch out the 90, it is really thin. It's like the 60 and 40, but there's something about it that there is a pattern on it.
Yes.
When you stretch it. So it's funny. It's like the 180 pattern, except it's thinner. And so with the pattern, I find that coloring it is tricky.
Can you explain what you mean by the pattern? Because both you and I know it is, but I feel like some people have not noticed this.
Yeah. So if you stretch the 180, 160, 140, and the 90, and this probably is just the way that Cartotecnica Rossi creates their crepe paper in those lines, in those weights. But when you super stretch it, you're trying to get rid of the grain lines. But even when you get rid of the grain lines, it looks to me, when I look at the pattern on it, it's not completely smooth. It looks kind of like cloudy. Like there's like poof of clouds on them.
I love that effect though.
And so one of the challenges with that is if you're going to do something really delicate, it's going to show up. So for example, if you're going to use a certain color and you're going to layer it for pastels pick up everything, right? They pick up all the patterns on the paper. You see that puffiness and you may or may not be a fan, depending on the circumstance, right? It really depends on the circumstance. You might be a fan of
doing with it.
Exactly. And so with poppies, I'm not a huge fan because I like mixing my weights. Usually what I do is I think about the color I want, and then I think about what papers have it. And so if I'm mixing it with 60, the 90 can be a little bit obvious. Yeah. That said, I do like the 90 in the white because it's delicate enough for the poppies. And when I color it with my yellow, it's still very silky. But the other colors, I find the bubbles are a little bit more obvious when I'm layering it with a different color. So I don't do that. I do use the 90 for it. I use the fine crepe paper as well, the German fine crepe paper, because there's just some colors in it that don't come in anything else.
Exactly.
And so pairing it with a different color and layering it, I get the color that I want. But the trick really is to, you really do have to experiment, make them all together, use different weights, and then see, do they look right together? Do they look like they're from the same family? Yeah. And you have to be choosy about that. You have to experiment a lot. You have to be very picky about that, or else it will be really obvious that, wait, that looks like a completely different weight.
Yeah, exactly. And also think about the colors as they come in warmer tones and cooler tones. You really don't want to mix it together unless you're doing something very specific and contrasty. But a cool pink versus a warm pink is very noticeable when you're pairing it next to each other.
Yeah. You have to be confident about what colors to choose. When it comes to cools. I do love mixing cool and warm. So I'm not sure I agree with you on that. I love mixing cool and warm, but you have to be very confident about what that looks like, because the wrong cool with the wrong warm can look, it can clash. But it's kind of like when you think about matching pink and red.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work? It only works in certain tones, certain temperatures, but it's experience. It's like kind of relying on your gut feeling. Like, does that look right together? And then, making mistakes. And then sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. You never know. Experiment. Always experiment.
You do.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the 90 gram, because it's very exciting. I love what Cartotecnica Rossi is doing with the new colors that are coming in. It's just amazing how they're really pushing the envelope on the colors for crepe paper, because they're coming out with these beautiful shades that are just like, yes, this is exactly what we need. And I've been very lucky because, Kate Alicorn lives in Seattle. We meet up quite frequently, and she's been sharing with me the new colors. And they came out with 10 new colors this year, and she has the amazing privilege of picking them. So you need to thank Kate for this. And she's coming up with these amazing, fun names to go with them. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I believe they're going to be releasing it very, very shortly. So check it out on Cartotecnica Rossi website.
Yeah, that is really exciting, the colors that are coming out. But also the 90. So the 90 grams came out only a couple years ago.
Yes.
Like it's a very recent thing compared to all the other like weights, like very recent, very new. So it's amazing that they've like Cartotechnica Rossi is like, you know what, we're jumping on this bandwagon and we're just going to keep creating colors, just keep going with them.
And it's because of you guys. You guys are the one that says we need this particular weight. There was a weight gap between, I would say, the 60 and the 140. It was a huge gap. And we're like, we need something with that stretchability that you would get with the 140, but we needed that delicacy one. And because of you guys demanding it and asking for it, Cartotechnica jumped on the wagon and did it. So congratulate you guys, seriously, because that really changed the paper flower realm. I love
your buying power matters. It really
does. And okay, saying that, I would say that is my biggest why, you guys. Because, you know, this season 5 is all about the whys. Why am I really doing this? I have a really big goal. I think you heard it in my past beginning season 1 episode. I really want to have more people fall in love with paper flowers. Why do I want that? I selfishly want more supplies. And it's been really amazing to see the demand increase over time, the recognition. Anne Woodlucker, or Anne Wood of the Woodlucker, her article got printed in the Wall Street Journal talking about paper flowers, you guys. That is the command that we are reaching out there. It's slowly becoming somewhat of a norm. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I think it's already been put out there by the time we published this episode. But I was recently on the Ellen show, but only as a gaming contestant. I wasn't there to showcase paper flowers, but they did ask me what I did for a living. And I did mention that I was a paper artist and that I made paper flowers. And the co-host was Tiffany Haddish, and she was like, I mean, you could see the whole audience and the co-host and the host was there. Is like, what? What is a paper artist? And what is paper flower? What do you mean by that? So I think I'm hoping that by me just saying that on national TV, that people are going to be really curious and be wondering, like, what is this? And so I'm hoping that people will also fall in love with paper flowers. And I am just in love with paper flowers as much as I started back, 7-8 years ago now. So it's been a strong thing. And I love how our paper flower industry has just evolved and changed. And with the 90 gram, let's talk about the 90 gram again, because they have almost 20 colors in this particular line, which is absolutely amazing. And because of you guys, you have mentioned the greens crepe has been fading like crazy. We both, all of us have noticed it. And we're like, how do we work with this? And we talked about in this past episode, is like, we love the fade because you kind of want to age with your paper flowers. Like, why fight a thing that's going to happen? You can either diet and continuously diet and put preservative to preserve that color. But sometimes you just want to go with the flow, and having that green turn into that beautiful kind of like sagey yellow color, brown notes in it. It actually works really well if you're doing a window display. Toward, summer, toward fall, it looks like the window has completely changed. So
like
work with it.
Display.
Yes.
Except if it happens quite quickly, then you're like, oh.
Yeah. Exactly. Hit that right spot, you guys, when you're using it.
Use the right spot.
But, because of you guys complaining about it, Cartotechnica re-changed the recipe to preserve it even more. Yeah. So if you haven't tried the new greens, they had to revamp the recipe. It has definitely more staying power. So if you guys have tested it out, comment, let us know what you think of it. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you want it back? I think a lot of people are like, no, we don't want it back. What are you talking about? But it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, the 90s, I think they've been so innovative, bringing out different types of greens too. And Kate, I mean, obviously had a hand in choosing which types of greens to actually produce.
Yeah.
And because
it's such a beautiful color eye.
Yeah. We know that Cartotechnica Rossi is always experimenting with different colors, but they have to decide, okay, out of all of these, which ones should go to the market? And that's a really important decision. And so having Kate's eye on it is really, really amazing. But just seeing the types of greens, I'm really excited. I have to say, some of them remind me of the German heavy crepe paper greens.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with mimicking those because a lot of people do like those German heavy florist crepe greens. I actually think that they are they have a lot of staying power.
I have to admit, the leaf moss, the doublet, that is my go-to for leaves and foliages. I love the darker, I love the brighter side. I love that I can flip it back and forth. And, if you wash dye it, I mean, taking the whole thing and putting water, it actually blends the two colors together and you get a third color. So there's so many ways that, I mean, if you can think it, make it happen. So experiment. Again, experiment, you guys.
Yeah, just don't take our words for it because our need for a certain type of paper is going to be different from yours. Yeah. The 90 gram, when it first came out, I was a bit skeptical. I will say, because I was like,
I love it.
because I was like, what does it have that I don't already have? And to be honest, I don't use it that much. I do use it for fine crepe stuff, but I don't use it that much. I know. I'm probably the outlier here.
Okay. I love the ability to ruffle the petal edges. I feel like the 90, as long as you don't stretch the whole thing and you only ruffle the top edges, carnations, oh my gosh, it's just really beautiful to be able to add those ruffle, fluty edges to it that just creates a lot of movement. But you have to be very careful because if you overstretch it, there's no way to bring it back. It's just beyond. So you're gonna really
that's the thing, is because it is very easy to overstretch it. It can be loose. Easy. So it reminded me a little bit of the Chinese where it's a little bit loose on that. And there's still grain lines. And I think and that is honestly a style thing. It's an aesthetic thing. It's just what you like and what you don't like. I do love them on my pansies because of the fluting.
So pretty.
Like you said,
my gosh.
And irises as
well.
Your
pansies are so beautiful. You need to teach everyone how to do that.
Probably not. I have to keep some things to myself. I honestly have to keep some things to myself. And it's so my aesthetic that I need to keep some things to myself. Otherwise, it's like I think too much of myself in the world, I kind of lose myself.
I totally understand that. Yep.
So, but given say that, I do love how the 90 is very versatile. If you had to choose between the 180 and the 90, you probably would go with the 90 if you can, because the green lines are the green lines are there, but they're fine. They're pretty fine. And there's nothing, they're not nearly as heavy, on the eye as the 180. And the colors that they come in, I have to say, are brilliant. They've chosen the colors probably that sell the best. The lighter tones and the pinks and the, some of those more easily acceptable colors. And when you're coloring them, it's easier when they're lighter because you can always add color. It's hard to take away color, right? And Italian is not great for taking away color. It just doesn't work very well.
It really does not.
Yeah, it doesn't. So they've done a really good job of choosing those colors that, and like, even when you stretch them out, they're not like suddenly, oh, I completely lost the color. It doesn't look like the color that I bought, which is great. Yeah. And I think Italian crepe paper has always been amazing at that. Like, you get what you see. It's like the color's not going to change just because you stretched it out.
Yeah. Can we talk about the 140? I have to admit, I don't really use the 140 at all.
The paper place doesn't sell the 140. So I've never actually tried the 140. I've never tried the what is the other ones? The
water resistant.
The light fast. Yeah, the water resistant ones. I've never tried those either.
It has a weird plastic coating that is very noticeable for paper flowers. That I've seen it and I'm just like, not so much. And so to me, the 180 is pretty close to the 140, but it just comes in a more variety of colors. That it's just so much easier to work with. And even though it does fit, there's certain colors that fade, some colors that have really amazing, strong power of colors. But I kind of skip over the 140. So if they were to fade anything out, the 140 I love the 90, completely different from the 180. And I just go between those two.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess one of the things people often talk about is like, how do you deal with the grain lines? Maybe don't deal with the grain lines and just stretch it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Just stretch it out and laminate it.
Yeah, if you're doing smaller flowers, use the grain lines as measurements because they're evenly measured throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, like
all your petal size. Yeah, you can
for sure.
Definitely use that as your measuring.
For sure. Yeah, the 180 is quite heavy in the grain lines. And I know it can kind of distract your eyes. And I know some people have asked, well, how do you deal with that? Because it doesn't look real. And I think that that's probably the only way you can deal with it is like not actually relying too much heavily on the grain lines, but to either stretch it out fully or stretch it out partially and kind of take advantage of that. Same with the 90. You know what? I'll tell you why I don't rely too much on the 90. I have to laminate it because once you stretch it out, it's really flimsy. That's why. And nothing wrong with flimsy because if you're just going to like make it and then have it displayed and you don't need to ship it, you don't need to put it in a bouquet or arrangement. And I remind you with bouquets, it gets shifted around a lot. You can't control how those flowers hit each other and squish into each other. So you have to think about that when you're making your flowers is it can't be squishable really, or else like your customer is going to get it and it's going to be all squished up. You can't rely on them to be like, hey, fluff it out, fix it out. Like that's not their role, right?
The Awesome Blossom workshops are wrapping up and we're celebrating with an in-person party. We're hosting a workshop from May 13th to 15th at Hope Flower Farm and Winery in Virginia. We'll teach you how to make 2 new flowers and how to arrange your paper bloom. Plus, internationally acclaimed fresh florist, educator, and designer Holly Chappell will teach you her Hollyish style of arranging using freshly cut flowers from her farm, and you will arrange alongside her. Tickets are only limited to 20 students and they're available to purchase starting March 25th. But if you're one of our Awesome Blossom students and you have the golden ticket, you can grab a spot right now and save $500. Come and celebrate with us face to face. Head over to our website now and reserve your spot. We can't wait to meet you. I need to bring up a point. I see a lot of this happen. Boutonnieres, you guys wear boutonnieres and they hug a lot at weddings.
Yes, that's true.
It gets crushed.
Good point.
You need to be very careful on the paper that you use for boutonnieres. They actually get manhandled a lot more because it's so small, forgettable, that when they come in for a hug, people actually don't notice it as much and they just go in for the hug and it gets crushed. So something to really think about, like how do you straighten up those small little flowers? Usually there's maybe 3 to 5, maybe more if you do really tiny flowers. But when you do tiny flowers, you automatically want to reach for the lighter weight because you want it light and airy. But for boutonnieres, it really should be the opposite. You need to fool the eye by creating a sturdy flower that is light and airy. So think about it. And that makes me want to talk about the doublet. That was when I first started. I absolutely fell in love with the doublet. It was sturdy. It was strong. It had a lot of staying power. It had cross purpose. Like I could use it in so many different ways. And one time before I discovered the fine crepe paper, Rosemill actually sent me a packet of crepe paper that was not glued. So I had these flimsy doublet paper that was like one-sided. So it wasn't double-sided glued together. I was like, what do I do with this? And I kept looking at it, picking it up, like, this is so light. I was totally expecting doublet. And so one time I just sat down, I was like, okay, what can I do with this? It was actually really perfect for calyx, bracts. You wanted to add some structures, some defining details on the back of the flowers without adding a lot of weight. That's one of the best uses for me when I'm doing the fine crepe paper was one of that. And that's how I fell in love with the fine because I didn't know how to use it until that moment came. I was like, what do I do with this? And then I started like, oh, I really needed to rediscover this a little bit more. So I feel like there's cycles of me going through flowers and figuring
Makes sense.
And do I do 180? Do I do 140? Do I do German, Italian, Chinese, Mexican? Do I do streamers like the American denizens? So it's fun. I feel like that's why,
it comes with need, right? It's like, we always talk about this where you're like, yes, I mean, some people are amazing at looking at the material and saying, this is what I can make from it, which is amazing. Sometimes like you get inspired. You're like, oh, that color, I'm going to make a poppy from this. But sometimes you're like at a point where you're like, okay, I need to make this flower. how am I going to do that? What is my objective? What do I need to think about in terms of structure, in terms of color, and what paper suits it best? And doing it that way is, yes, there's a lot of experimentation, but it's so satisfying once you everything falls in place and you're like, okay, that paper is good for this because I know that the properties of that paper. I know the qualities. I know what it can do, what it can't do, what are its limitations, what are its strengths. And I think that requires you to get your hands on it and like work with it and also fail, right? Trying to do it, make something with it and failing and realizing, okay, that's the limit. That's what I can't do with it. What can I do with it? Right. So yeah, you really have to get your hands on it. And I have to say the double-sided doublet, like you can't go wrong with it.
So if you're starting out, you guys, start with a doublet. It's just really easy. You don't have to worry about the grain lines. It has great stretch, cupping ability, fluting ability. A lot easier to like start.
Absolutely.
But once you start, experiment with the other ones because the other crepe papers are so beautiful. And it's really elevated my craft a little bit more on how I present my flowers to my customers. It's fun, you guys. It's so fun. Like, and the colors. And once so I would say when you first start out, you want to use the colors that it comes in. But then the next step is like, how do you start adding colors to it? An easy way is alcohol markers. You don't have to worry about mixing colors. It goes on, it has staying power. But then you start thinking about what else do I have? Your next one is going to be acrylic paint because that's really cheap, readily available. And then you'll move on to watercolor. And then you'll move on to gouache. Gouache is a mixture of acrylic and watercolor. So that's really interesting, the properties of that. So I think there's like layers and layers of experimentation that you can add on there.
Or whatever you have. Literally, whatever you have.
Oh my gosh. The possibility is endless. People have dyed it with tea, with vegetables, onions, with turmeric, using the spices for pollen. I've done that, using turmeric to dye your paper because it's a beautiful golden, kind of like a mustard yellow. That's like for that rose, the mustard rose. That's absolutely beautiful. Oh my gosh. Using tea, like the black Earl Grey will give you a different nuances. Rubio's tea is also another interesting one. Let's see, what else is there? There's also beet, supposed to give you a pink. Avocado will also give you a lovely pink. So many ways to color your paper on top of it. So, I mean, the thing is, experiment. Look around what you have. You don't have to pay a lot of money to elevate your craft. You can just look around your house, which is so fun. And of course, I'm going to shout out to my favorite glue, Aleene's. Aleene's not only come with one, but they come in, I feel like, a dozen different types of glue adhesive, from glue sticks to glue pins to turbo to fast drying to like clear gel. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And it's been really fun using all these weights of glue. I mean, I feel like people haven't really talked about, it's like, how do you know what glue to use with crepe paper? I mean, I know a lot of people with the 180, they love to use hot glue because it sticks right away. I actually like to take my time with 180 and actually use a lean tacky glue. I like to use the turbo. I don't know. It just gives me this ability to like fix things before it dries. Hot glue is like, it's so fast. You gotta like, oh, you're done. You can't move it.
You're done.
I might go back with the hot glue at the very end once I get everything settled. But usually by that time, the glue has already set and it's pretty sturdy. And I have to say, I did the large poppies and I used the Aleene's Ultimate Glue. It stayed on. Like, it was really amazing. Even Sarah of the Handmade, Sarah Kim, she was like, how did you glue that on? And I was like, I just used this. It was super easy. And we were shaking it around and we're like, whoa, this is amazing. I love that product. They sent it to me as a sample to work on. And I was like, oh, wow, what is this? It's okay. It's a clear, it's almost like Gorilla Glue, but without, Gorilla Glue takes a really long time to like set. Like they say, take about 24 hours. A tiny bit of the Ultimate Aleene's Tacky Glue, like, set almost immediately. Like, I use a dot for my spun cotton, and it was like, insert in, done. And then I used it for the poppies so I use a PVC pipe and I use a mesh wire. So there's holes. And I was really concerned about the holes not lining up with the PVC pipe because there was air pockets. But I just I glued it on, I set it on, and then I would say a couple of layers around the edges to make sure that it was intact. And I just let it sit and cured, and it really did its job. And it really stayed on. Yeah, I was really impressed with it because the poppy heads were really heavy. I would say the weight came from the stamens because on each poppy head there was close to like 300 stamens per head. And I had a floral tape. I hate floral tape now. Oh my gosh. I felt like my arms were like going to die off because, it's so, the wires are so thin and you had to like, floral tape it up. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. I'm like tired of that project. It's beautiful. I loved it. But I'm like, I don't want to do another one. But I might have to do another one.
Okay. What do we have left? Okay. Let's quickly talk about the extra fine. German.
We're going to talk about the Chinese and the Mexican and a little bit about the Denison.
Yes. So the extra fine crepe paper, you can find that at Rose Mill as well. And you can also find that exclusively through Leah Griffith. And that's because she has the licensing rights to certain colors, not necessarily the weight.
Cut this out, please. Leah Griffith is expiring.
Ooh.
And so,
it has expired or hasn't expired?
It's expiring, or because Mike told me this, he is now licensed to sell German crepe paper.
Yes. So, because they told him that there is no restrictions in terms of what colors he can choose.
Yeah, so he's able to carry unbranded Leah Griffith crepe paper.
That's awesome. Because I would totally give me give me 1 second.
Yep.
So the other German crepe paper is the extra fine crepe paper that you can also find at Rose Mill, and they carry a couple of colors. So hopefully they'll carry more. But it's funny because like you mentioned, it's called extra fine crepe paper, but it's not finer than the fine crepe paper.
Yes. So deceiving.
I don't know how it works, but
German translation is different.
Yes, maybe. But the extra fine crepe paper, it's like a thicker version because it has heavier grain lines. And so it's actually not as fine and not as delicate as the fine crepe paper. Because you touch the fine crepe paper, it's almost like tissue paper, except with a slight roughness to it. But then the extra fine crepe paper, and I don't really want to compare it to the 90 because the 90 has a little bit thicker grain line, but it's like a baby version of a 90.
Yes.
Where
it doesn't have that long extra stretch. I feel like
it has. It does have a good stretch. It does have a good stretch, more than the double-sided, but not as much as the 90. But it's very buttery. I have to say, it's very buttery.
It is. It's very smooth. I love touching. I love touching the German crepe paper, like any of their lines. It just has this beautiful smoothness that you can't find in the Italian, which is sad to say, but whatever.
I know. And I have my favorite colors in the extra fine that don't come in the fine crepe paper. So explore those colors too, because there's some really beautiful, the greens are beautiful. I love the purples. I'm a purple fan, obviously. And then later on, I think Rose Mill started carrying the heavy, so the florist or the heavy crepe paper.
Yeah.
The heavy German crepe paper, which is comparable to the 180 in the Italian. Except that their colors are slightly different. I liked their greens more. I don't have access to them. I only see them, and I have them in small packages because they come in long rolls, and Rose Mill to ship them to me in Canada is like $50, or $70. It's something ridiculous.
Yeah. I'll bring you some when I see you in May.
Yes, I would love to. I have really short ones, really baby. The baby short long ones. Yeah. But then again, now that Cartotechnica Rossi has brought out greens in their 90, that is somewhat similar in the green range.
Yeah.
It actually is more accessible for most people to get those too.
Yeah.
So
if you're in Europe, Arlo Arts in the UK, you can purchase it there. Purchase from Carnacecca Rossi directly, and they can ship it to you. And that will probably be the easiest if you want to grab the new ones.
Yeah, and they have a really good free shipping option too. If you buy off a certain amount, like it's really cool. So like you can see their box and like they fill it up. It's virtual, right? And then they show you how far the box you have. And then once you fill it up, it's like, you know, you get whatever free shipping, which is really, really awesome.
It is nice. And then let's talk about Chinese. Okay, so let's talk about Paper Mill. There's a lot of controversy with that, but Papermart.com, which is located in California. The thing I hate about and love about Papermart is they do carry a whole bunch of wide variety of items, for packaging, paper flowers, to the crepe paper. The crepe paper they offer now is the Chinese, the Mexican, and the Italian crepe paper. So you can I wish they would carry German too, but then that would be like a one-stop shopping place. But then I have to say, I love supporting Rose Mill and I love supporting Cart Finney. They're American-based. I know both of them, Michelle and Mike. They're amazing people. And with COVID, it's just been a really rough time for everybody with imports coming in. And I just felt like Papermart is undercutting everybody.
For sure.
So that is, but because Papermart, I have to balance this very carefully. I did look at Cart Finney and I was trying to buy certain colors and he was sold out. And I had to buy it because my customer demanded it. So, of course, I looked at another resource. Papermart came up and they had the color and it was a lot cheaper. So, something to think about as you're going through. And I do love developing a relationship. Strongly, my first place is always to buy from Cart Finney and also from Rose Mill before I purchase from anywhere else. In desperate needs, I will search other places. So, it's sad to point out, but they do carry it if you're looking for it. But the shipping is crazy expensive. So really think about, if you're buying from Papermart, buy a lot so your shipping will balance it out. Because if I'm sending a box to myself, I'm paying $50 to $75 for shipping costs, you guys. It's ridiculous. But something to think about as you're purchasing more and more quantity.
So it's kind of like, would you rather pay more for your product but get more affordable shipping? Because I know Cart Finney with Mike, I mean, the shipping it's regular shipping, regular people shipping.
Exactly.
So like you're paying a little bit more, you're supporting his business, you're supporting his livelihood, and you're not paying as much to FedEx or UPX or Papermart where you're paying for less for the product, but you're paying a lot to FedEx.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so ridiculous. I'm always sticker shocked. I was like, oh, do I really want to buy this?
So from Canada, I did in the past have bought crepe paper from Papermart because they did carry the Chinese, which was all they carried at the time, actually.
Yeah.
Right. They only recently started carrying the Italian. And at the time, they also had a lot more colors in the Chinese. Like if you go to the website now, there's like 5 of each, and they're like probably the colors that don't sell. So the good colors are not there. Like the moss green is not there. And the browns are not green. The peaches are not, like none of them are there.
Oh, yes.
And then I also had before shopped there for stem wires because they had like the long 36-inch ones.
Yes.
It's the only place they had it. It is cloth wrapped, which is a little bit different. Not my favorite to work with, but I guess better than bare sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
But since then, I have not purchased anything from there because the shipping was like $70 American.
It's crazy, you guys. Crazy.
And I'm like, you're a big company. You can't reduce that. Like, you can't anyways. So, and to be honest though, whatever they quote you, who knows? Part of it might just be for them. It might not be the shipping cost. It might actually be their cut too. I don't know. But anyways, it's just something to think about now that they don't carry that much of the Chinese. But we should talk about why we even bought the Chinese to begin with.
Yes. Let's do
What did you like about them, Quynh?
No one was carrying that beautiful soft brown that I love to use to wrap my branches. It was just this perfect medium soft brown that just was there and it didn't distract from the flowers. Some of the browns that I saw from the Italian I believe German doesn't even have any brown, but the brown was a little bit too dark and too heavy. Even if I like recolored it, it just wasn't the same. And
it's a gray brown, the Chinese brown.
Yeah, exactly. And it was perfect because I used it as paper tape. And it was I didn't need the durability. I didn't need the stretch. I was going to stretch it out anyway to cover my branches. It was absolutely perfect. And it was really strong. And I felt like the glue didn't tear into the paper as much. And I could use it to wrap it. And it was perfect for what I needed. The moss green, let's talk about that. That is, at that particular time, years back, that was like the perfect yellow green that you can find anywhere else. And it was inexpensive. I have to admit, it's like $2 a roll. So it was really cheap, and I was doing a lot of large installation, and I had to really think about my cost, even though paper is not that expensive. But if you're using like 50 rolls at a time, the costs do add up, and you have to really think about how can I minimize my expenses because my labor is so expensive.
Yeah.
So, and then to offset that with the customer. So something to think about. How about you? What did you like the Chinese for?
I did like the colors because it was muted. And they were different. I mean, I just buy based on color. So it kind of fit between the colors I didn't have. And then I figure out how to use the texture. But that said, I mean, that was at the beginning. Now it's like a little bit different. Yeah. In terms of my practice and what matters to me and what doesn't. But yeah, I mean, like absolutely the moss green. I mean, I still have it. I have my display ring from 2018. Yes. It still lives on in 2020. I know. And the color has changed. But it's like a golden green now, and then I look at some other pieces that are Italian, that, dark olive green that came out at the very, very beginning. And now it turned brown. It turned brown, like brown within a month. Yeah. And now it looks okay because it kind of mixes in. But at the beginning, I was like, what I know the dyes that the Chinese use are probably not good for the environment. That's why their staying power is so good. Artichoke Rossi, they use eco-friendly, that's what they say, eco-friendly dyes. So the colors are not going to last as long in the sun. Yeah. But the Chinese, man, like they know how to dye their stuff because it's staying power. The brown that we use, the brown that you were talking about, has not changed in color at all. Like it still looks like that brown gray color of a branch. It's still. Do you have any of that brown? Can I buy some off of you? I might have some. I may have stocked up on some. Oh my gosh. But this is like way back, like years ago, because I was like, shipping is so expensive. I need to buy more because I'm not going to. It's ridiculous. So each roll was like probably like $10. But yeah, no, with the other color that I actually like from the Chinese is they have some cool pink. You don't see a lot of cool pinks in the Italian or the German. No. Because a lot of people don't know how to deal with the cool pink colors. It's hard when you're choosing colors. The warmer ones, if you have warm colors generally, it's hard to stick a cool one in there. Like a lot of people won't. It just draws the eye. It does. That's the point. Yeah. But you need to use it in a way that makes sense. And so they don't have a lot of that. And for some reason the Chinese have at least one cool pink. It's a light cool pink, and it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But otherwise, like the other colors some of them are a little bit strong. Like the purples are a little bit strong. And I also find their dyes don't come out very easily. So you wouldn't be able to really take color out of them, and you won't be able to use the dyes from them. Yeah. Which is probably why they last so long. Like they don't fade because they stick so well to the paper. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But the stretch, I have to say, the stretch is lacking. You don't use it for the stretch. It's very flimsy. Yeah. So that's the downside of those types of papers is that they're not made very well, but there's a strength in that. Not made, very well. There's a strength in that. You just don't use it for what it doesn't do. Right? Yeah, don't expect it to be like the 180 where it holds all the cupping like really well. Like, just don't do that. Yeah. And I've never tried the Mexican. You haven't? No. Oh, I'll bring some for you. Well, we're in Canada. We don't really get Mexican products. I would have to buy from the States. It's fine. I have so much paper that I'm like, I don't need to go ahead to. But tell us about Mexican crepe paper, because I've heard some positive things about that.
Yeah, so I would say you can buy it at Paper Mart. It's different from the Chinese, but not by much. It just comes in a more brighter color palette than I would say. It's not as muted as Chinese. But maybe it's because they're used for piñatas, is the way that I've seen it. So, but yeah, it's the same as the Chinese, but a little bit brighter in colors. So if you want a more saturated palette color, that would be where I go. But I have to say, I don't use it as much because I get distracted by the beautiful Italians, and I just fall back with the German crepe paper. And those are my big go-to because I can buy them very easily, and they just work really well with all the flowers that I make.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like you just kind of find a time and place for it sometimes.
Exactly.
But like having more knowledge of what's available is helpful when you're trying to figure out how to make something. And then you kind of decide, do I want to use that? Or what do I have on hand? Like you said, you don't always have everything on hand. Exactly. And what can I substitute for one over the other?
Yeah. And also experiment. If you're doing let's say you're doing a poppy and you're like, I'm going to just I have the time to experiment. I'll make this poppy with the same template and make it in all the different ways. And then that will be your best bet. It's like, that really worked for this ruffle, but how do I apply it to a different flower? So it's just really fun to experiment and to take notes as you're doing things. And it does help a lot when you're repetitively creating like a peony 5 times. You will see it change because my own method is when I do a flower, I'm constantly thinking about how can I improve this for the next time I make it. Especially if I'm doing 5 in a row, I will actually tweak it every single time. So that 5 peony will not look the same. It might look similar, but if you really dig down and compare it note to note, it's going to be slightly different because I'm always like, what if I did this? How would that turn out? So I think that's the really fun part of paper flowers is just like in nature, none of my flowers is the same and I don't want it to be the same. And the interesting part is I'm super happy when I'm done with it. But the moment I move on to the next and I look back, I'm like, why did I do that? Why was I so happy with it? And so it's just, but the thing is, you learn as you go and you're applying new techniques and you're pulling your techniques from one flower to another flower because you're like, what if I did that? And you're happy with it. And so at the moment, I always love what I'm doing. And I'm always moving on to the next project.
As you should.
Yeah. So this is pretty much the basic go-to for crepe papers, you guys. We would love to hear your thoughts and share what you love about. Tell us what crepe paper you use first of all, and why do you love using it, and what's your least favorite crepe paper that you don't use that much at all. And share us your technique, share us what you love and what you hate, because that just makes conversation go around and it improves your technique and it improves your experimentation.
Yeah, it really does. I think, the crepe paper, there's so many strengths and so many limitations depending on what you want to do with it. That's the thing. Like it could be possibilities could be endless, but if you have a certain goal in mind, then, one's probably better than the other. But it's always fun seeing how you can stretch those limitations. How much further can I make this petal look smooth, or how size-wise too. We don't even talk about size, but talk about sizes. You're obviously going to turn to 180. That is the biggest strength of the 180 is being able to make these huge, huge flowers, like out of this world flowers, because no other crepe paper way would be able to structurally create something like that. Like it just, we love the softness of some of the other ones, but there's no way that you would ever try to use, fine crepe paper, or even doublet for a huge flower. Because
you would probably have to laminate it like multiple times to get that strength. But your flowers could never be that big because they only come in 10-inch height. So that's something to really consider as you're going and making large versus small, and the weights, the stretchability, the durability. Like there's so many different things to think about as you experiment and make all the different flowers. Have fun, you guys.
I know, that's our why, right?
Yes. 100% yes. All right, you guys. Talk to you later.
Bye.
See you at the next episode. We would love to thank you, our listener, and especially our patrons for supporting our podcast, Paper Talk, and for making Season 5 possible.